unfortunately, our brains are like Velcro for negativity and Teflon for positive, more enjoyable, delightful moments. And so we got to help our brain out with these practices.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Let's Be Real podcast. I'm your host, Nicole Eunice, and I believe we need all the help we can get when it comes to living a full and free life. Here you'll find honest truth, practical tips, and perspective changes that help you embrace the miracle that is your life. It's an in-process conversation that's going to be unfiltered, and it better be fun. Let's get real together. Hey everyone, welcome to Let's Be Real. I am so excited about today's episode because I've been spending a few minutes before this chatting with my new friend, Nicole, who is on the show for the first time. And we've just met. And a lot of times I get to have people that I've already known in different circles on the show. But I feel like I know Nicole because I've been reading her latest book, which comes out this week. And I'm just so excited to have you. So thanks for being here with us today.
Oh, I'm honored. Like I said to you before we started, big fan of your work and honored that you had me on here and excited to talk today.
Oh my gosh, so fun. So I was telling you before the show, I had your book with me this week. I was traveling and doing some work with a staff team. And I brought your book because I wanted to kind of tell your story of what if it's Tuesday in this marriage intensive story that we'll tell in a minute. But I shared that. And as the book was sitting there, one of the people on the staff team was like, I didn't know that was your maiden name. And I was like, it's number one, I'm not referencing my own book like on the table. Number two, there are more than one Nicole in the world, and we're both therapists. And we both, love, and I love that you, in your work, do so much connecting like the heart and theology in a way that's really accessible. So well done. And I'm excited to jump in to this book, What If It's Wonderful? But before we do that, Nicole, can you just tell us a little bit? I've got a couple of questions to help us know you a little bit more. So tell everybody like where you are kind of physically in the world and what your week sort of looks like right now in the season.
Oh, that's a great question.
It's a hard one to answer.
So the first part I can answer clearly. You'll be pleased to know. I am in Connecticut in a small beach town right on the Long Island Sound, just outside New York City. So it's kind of this juxtaposition of, small town beach living, and we're right outside Manhattan. So that's where I am. And my week mostly looks like, thank goodness, just juggling my three little ones. I have a 5, almost 6-year-old boy. I have a 2-year-old boy and a 1-year-old daughter.
So awesome.
Which they're such gifts to me. And each of their stories taught me a little something about the Lord and our role here, and really blessed by them. So, and then I see clients a couple days a week as a therapist, and do a lot of writing in between.
So I'm curious, there's so much we could talk about in being in practice and caring for people and also being a mother. And I know that you touch on these themes, in your work, but I'm curious, like currently we're filming this a little bit before the book comes out. So you're in that liminal space where like it isn't quite in people's hands yet. And I'm wondering just what are a couple of things that you're seeing God teach you like in the last month or two in your own life?
Yeah, it's a funny thing. I don't know if this happens for all authors, but the ones I've talked to resonate with this. I think when you write a book, you often get the opportunity to practice the things that you write. And for me, just having an expectant heart and making sure that, I truly believe that what sits at the center of our affection determines the satiation of our joy. And so making sure that that my loves are in the right order, and that the right things are at the center of my affection. And, part of what the book's about, and I talk about a few times in different chapters, is just that that profound fear of disappointment.
Mm.
Um, and I realized, it became clear to me in writing the book, but also remembering it again in these last few weeks, is that my disappointment most of the time is not so much about the no, or the missed opportunity or whatever it is, but it's about having my loves in the wrong order,
Mm.
expecting more joy from a gift than it was meant to give.
Mm.
And usually that's at the heart of my disappointment. And so there's good news in that. I'm empowered to talk myself through that and remember the truth that we're given in scripture, and walk myself through to a different place, to reorder
Mm.
the things that are good things, but when I'm expecting more joy than they were meant to give.
Mhm.
Some might call that idols. Some might call that
Yeah.
ordered love. We have lots of terms for what that is, but and that's been helpful to keep in mind in
Mm.
this.
Oh man, I love that. And this my follow-up question is, can you tell us about a few ways that you cultivate? You said the word expectant heart.
Mhm.
What are a couple of your own rituals or ways that you cultivate an expectant heart, especially for those of us who are maybe prone to cynicism or
Yeah.
sarcasm as a way to move through life? Not
Mhm.
calling out any particular Nicoles on this podcast.
I'll raise my hand too.
So, other than using dark humor as a way to get through the world right now, I'm curious, yeah, like what are a couple ways for you?
Yeah, there's so many. And the last third of the book really gets more practical and still uses scripture and story and research and psychology. But I try to get real practical with some of those rituals, because you're so right. We have to practice the peace and
Hmm.
joy that we long to feel, and
Mm.
just some real simple ways. I want them to be doable because I think so often to celebrate and cultivate an expectant heart, we think we have to plan something grand.
Hmm. Hmm.
But two of my favorites, that I go into detail in the book on, are savoring.
Mm.
So, what savoring does is it celebrates the ordinary.
Mm.
And this is available to us at any time, any day, regardless of whether we feel like we have a reason to celebrate
Mm.
or not. And really, it's just asking your five senses what they're going to remember about this moment.
Mm.
So, what am I seeing? What am I tasting? What am I feeling? What am I hearing? Which one am I missing? Um,
Smelling.
Smelling. What do I smell?
Hmm. Hmm.
And we ask our senses what they're going to record from
Mm.
the memory. And it just helps cement in our brain what our brain would be tempted to discard as unimportant.
Mm.
Because our brain's efficient, it likes to record things, painful or otherwise, that it thinks it's going to need later, and it also records things that are most familiar to us. And
Mm.
unfortunately, left on neutral, the brain leans negative. So we need to help it out with really embracing the joy of our everyday lives. And what motivates me to do this is, you and I are both going to live many beautiful moments in
Mm.
our lives. Hopefully, we will remember a lot of them, but none of them are going to be just like this one.
Hmm.
And so savoring just helps me record what I might be tempted to wish away because I've got a to-do list, or, um, just write off as insignificant.
Hmm. Or just like you're not being mindful. And this is incredible because we just had a moment like this right before our interview. We were eating our lunch. My husband is over here and my
Oh,
friends
nice.
on the team. And my daughter texted that she had just felt like she failed a test.
Oh,
And she said, I almost started crying because I looked at the problems and I didn't even know how to start one. And
oh,
so while we're eating our lunch, each of us was sharing about remembering having an experience like that. I think almost anyone has that memory where you open a test or you open up an essay or a problem and you don't even know how to start it. And Joe, who's on my team, was like, yeah, I can experience that viscerally. He actually used the word visceral. And
yeah,
now here we are 30 minutes later saying, well, how can you actually help your mind savor things?
yeah,
So we all know what it's like to have a visceral negative experience. And
yeah,
you feel like you can be right back there. And
yeah,
we're all grown ups. None of us have taken a test like that in a long
yeah,
time. Yet we can all go right back to that moment.
for sure.
Yet here we are enjoying like this delicious food that we had picked up at a gourmet grocery. And we're enjoying conversation with each other. And we had an opportunity to also record that moment, like
Mhm.
savor connection and delicious food. And that was available, right? And
Yes.
so to hear you say that, I want folks to know that works. Like,
Yeah,
really, it's a small practice that
yeah.
makes a huge difference over time.
And it doesn't take a lot of time and you can do it at any moment. And you're
Mhm.
so right. Unfortunately, our brains are like Velcro for negativity, like those visceral moments that we
Mhm.
all can recall, even if it was 30 years ago.
Yeah.
um, and Teflon for positive, more enjoyable, delightful
Mhm.
moments. And so we got to help our brain out with these practices. And the second thing that comes to mind is the practice of Thanksgiving. It
Mm.
feels like we can't walk into a boutique without seeing a gratitude jar or journal or something. And I think that's awesome. I think gratitude has become more of a mainstream conversation and something we're talking about that does increase
Mhm.
our joy. I think what we're missing is that the gratitude that we feel takes us about halfway down the road,
Mm.
and Thanksgiving it doubles that joy that we feel through gratitude, actually expressing our gratitude that we feel in words. It's a way of celebrating the gift with the giver.
Mm.
So, this is true for interpersonal human relationships, and this is also true. I've really enjoyed this in my prayer life. This is
Mm.
true with celebrating the gift with the ultimate giver. And that was one thing I really focused on in the book as well. Is so often I think we picture God, or at least interact with him this way,
Mhm.
kind of walking us over that ground that's rough and hard, and we're tripping and stumbling, but we're clinging to him because we're so aware of our need for him. And then when we reach ground that's soft underfoot and delightful to walk, our need is just the same as it was on the other ground, but we forget. And I think we picture God kind of helping us through to the celebration. And then we don't have any context for what it looks like to celebrate with Him or engage
Mm.
in our joy.
Okay.
And so these practices are really about also engaging. What does it look like to cultivate intimacy with Christ in the light of our joy?
Mm.
And being a Christian almost my whole life, I was sad that before I started writing this book, I didn't really have a good picture of what that looked like.
Mm. So true. I mean, when you say it, and I actually would love for you, can you give us an example of like where gratitude, like what would be an example of gratitude kind of going halfway there and then gratitude changing to Thanksgiving so that we could apply it, today in our life?
Yeah, I think the helpful practices around gratitude that, again, they totally work and they're totally wonderful to do. But really noticing and naming. So noticing the good things that are happening in our day, putting names to them. Often, the reason we have the jars or the journals is there's something helpful about collecting.
Mm.
Um, and I can talk about that in a minute too. But Really, it's the noticing and the naming that logs them in their brain that just helps us to see differently.
Mm.
It helps us to see, oh, even in the midst of what might be a really painful season, there's goodness happening in my heart. We're not going to
Mm.
call that pain good. That's toxic positivity. We don't do that. But we are going to recognize that there's some good things that are
Mm.
growing and happening inside me and in my relationships that maybe wouldn't have happened
Mm.
otherwise. And we're also going to name that concurrently with that hard stuff, there's goodness happening too. Um,
Mhm.
and it just gives us it lifts our gaze to
Mhm.
see those things. What's cool about thankfulness is it gives us the opportunity. This is the celebration part to celebrate with the giver of whatever gift we're grateful for.
Mhm.
And there's something about sharing our joy,
Mm.
particularly with and this could be, I write my example in the book is I had written a note to my mentor who I could cry telling you
Mm.
the many fingerprints of his mentorship all over my heart and my life. And I had written him a note, and we went over to dinner, my husband and I, to he and his wife's house, and I passed the note across the table and just decided to essentially not read the note, but some people do that too, but just to express the essence of what was inside it
Mm.
face to face. And I really hoped it would bless him.
Yeah.
I completely underestimated the impact that it would have on me of
Mm.
getting to celebrate his gifts that he had given me with him and let him
Mm.
know. And, um, Paul in the New Testament, the Apostle Paul talks about chara, which is the Greek word for joy, in three different contexts. And one of them is sharing good news.
Mm.
Now, he was mostly referring to the good news of the gospel, but the psychological research would also say that sharing any kind of good news
Mhm.
with a friend or expressing that Thanksgiving and talking it through with them, like even right now, me sharing this with you is heightening my joy
Mm.
because I love talking about it and it's something that's special for me and I get to
Mhm.
tell you. So there's just something in the neuroscience that says it takes our gratitude, the joy we get from gratitude, and basically doubles it because it takes us through several more steps.
Oh my goodness. And here's the crazy thing, because I was going to ask you about this in a second. Even as I'm listening to you tell that story, this story is actually increasing my hope, which is
Oh,
interesting because
yeah.
this morning I was praying and I really am trying to do the gratitude thing. I'm actually not very good at it. Like,
Me
for a
neither.
person, I consider myself pretty imaginative, and I'm like,
Yeah.
Lord, I guess I'll thank you for the Cardinals again today. Cause I'll run it. I just don't know. But
Yeah.
I had a thing came to mind when I was outside today, and I was complaining last night. I feel like I'm in a pretty discouraged season in some ways. And I was complaining last night, and my son that you just met, because he just popped in here on a break, um, he said, Mom, like, everything really happens in its time for a reason.
Mhm.
And I this morning was like, I just got to experience my son imparting wisdom in my life, of the kind of wisdom that I have deeply hoped
Oh,
he would have received from us. You know what I'm saying? Like,
how
over our
cool is that?
and when you just shared your story, I thought, "Oh, I need to now go tell him." Like,
Yeah.
I wanna circle back and say, "I know
Yes.
you were just commenting last night, but this is what that meant to me." So, your joy is increasing when you're collecting the memory again.
Yes.
My hope is increasing about the fact that I can experience joy. You know what I mean? Like, what an interesting way that God allows our stories to work
Oh,
together.
that's amazing. Yeah, sharing that with him and what that will do for him too
Yeah.
is helping him. build his identity.
He'll probably like not really receive it really well because he's still a teenager, but I know I actually like this is what I love about having, practiced as a therapist is you're
Yeah.
like, you know it actually matters.
Oh
And
yeah.
I want all the moms and dads who are listening today
Yep.
to know
He'll tuck
no
it
matter
in.
how your kid acts, they're receiving it.
Yep.
Like it absolutely matters.
Yeah.
So you talk a lot in the book and your story, the way you tell your story is so vulnerable and beautiful. And you talk a lot about your struggle with infertility,
Mhm.
miscarriages, where God was and is in that. And the story, from when you wrote it, it's probably been about a year or so. When you fast forward and you look back at your life, what are some of those things that you think you learned or are learning that you don't think you otherwise would have learned through that suffering?
Ooh. Yeah, so many things. Um, I think the biggest one that comes to mind is I lost a lot of in that season of loss where I was losing tangible things and, just experiencing a lot of heartache. The good losses were losses of misplaced hope. And
Mm,
what I didn't realize going into that season was I would have said that I was Christ dependent. And I think in my head I was. But what I didn't realize is that there were a lot of props to my faith
mhm,
that actually I had my identity and sense of safety invested in those things,
mhm.
and just didn't know it. I was
Yeah.
totally numb to it, and I describe it as comfortable. Not that I think life has to be hard to be holy. I don't.
Mhm,
That's kind of a big message in the second book, but um, I was comfortable without Christ,
mm,
and didn't know it. And
yeah.
so when I walked through that season, the biggest aha moment and invitation for me was, okay, these other things are gone and I can't stand up.
Mm,
Um, and so redefining, also, I had a lot of misconceptions about who God is and who I am to Him. I had
mhm,
a very performance based faith, um, and spent a lot of time trying to have the perfect feelings for God instead of inviting Him into the feelings I actually have.
mm,
And so I became acquainted with His character in a totally different way.
mm.
I won't play God and pretend to say what would have happened, but it's hard for me to imagine me having the relationship with God and other people and my children, namely, that I do now without that season.
Yeah. And, gosh, it also to me, I don't know what the word is exactly, but maybe surrender. Like, it takes
Yeah,
courage and surrender and trust
yeah,
to say the things that you just said, like to allow pain to be redeemed
hmm,
when there might be like a little fighter in us who still just wants to be mad that it happened at anyway.
yeah,
The stubborn part of us that just still wants to live in that linear like progression, like we're all going to be in a romantic comedy or something. And yet there's this beautiful goodness on the other side of it. And I'm so glad that you're like a witness to that for all of us. What's one thing, like, if you think about a person reading your book as we're getting ready for it to land in people's hands this week, um, when you picture them, where do you hope that the book can move them from
mm,
this place to this place?
mm. Yeah. I really pray that the book gives people a picture for what it looks like to engage with God in
Mm,
both their struggle and their celebration. That we don't see God clearly in just one season, but in both.
hmm
Um, and that we would have a real picture for what it looks like
hmm
to practice those things that help us cultivate joy, in any circumstance. This
hmm
is not about putting a bow on things or pretending that painful things are somehow not painful or good.
Mm-hmm.
But this is about, engaging with God where you are and experiencing the joy that comes from that. I think also just having the courage to celebrate and um, looking to the future with an expectant heart to see what God can do and how He's going to move in our story.
Mm.
The title, I kind of tell the story of how the title came to be in chapter one, and I mean, it was like somebody hit me over the head with a hammer. It's almost like it had never occurred to me, like, oh, what if it's actually going to be okay? What if it's wonderful?
Yeah.
That is not how I tended to approach my life, and I will just be honest and vulnerable with you. I take my title to the face every time I look at my books. Like, this
Mm-hmm.
is not an area that I am all fixed up and fine in. Um, in fact, I was tempted to say, I recently did a small article related to the book, and I said, this is a message that has changed my life. And I had to delete it because while that is true, it has changed my life. It is still changing my life.
Mm-hmm.
This is a daily practice for me. So I am in the mud pit with every listener and reader, practicing this alongside you. But I want us to look to the future with an expectant heart, knowing that God is going to meet us,
Mm-hmm.
whatever lies ahead.
Mm.
And I want us to be able to receive without fear, and to walk through our seasons of struggle, knowing that what is dark today is not going to be dark forever.
Mm-hmm.
So if you think this is a book that doesn't apply to you because you're just not in a joyful season, all the more reason to pick it up.
Yeah.
Because joy is our inheritance in Christ. We're promised that. And Revelation is clear that sadness is not the end of the story.
Yeah. Yeah.
That what is dark today is not going to be dark forever for those who have put their trust in Christ. So that was a long answer to what I hope the readers would get, but I have a long wish list.
Well, I love that answer. And I also have experienced every book I've written. Like, I think another author said this to me, like every book you write is like prophetic. You think you're writing it because you learned it, but then it's like a whole different level of learning
Oh,
it
girl.
after you write it. And I'm like, this is terrible. I was like,
Yeah,
I definitely need to write like a fun book
I know.
I can have like lots of fun. But I mean, but we like fun. I know you like fun, and so do I. And I know we're both working on cultivating it. But
Yes.
God made us to swim in deep waters, and we hope that we can help those listening today also to take like a little bit of a step toward that depth, because it's beautiful and meaningful, and you can still have joy and be a person of depth and go through hard things like you've been going through. So thank you so much for being here. I always like to ask one closing question that's like way up here. Okay. Like we went down here, deep end. We're going to go now and get on our floaties in the shallow end.
Perfect.
So tell me like one, and this is actually perfect because it's about savoring in
Okay.
its own way. Tell me one product, app, thing that's just like changing your life right now. It's just you're savoring it because it's that great.
Okay, I have two. Is that okay?
Yes, of course.
Because these are stocking stuffers, and you know how stocking stuffers are like, oh, that's kind of fun, and then they're like the thing you end up using every day.
Yeah.
So one of them is like it's a cylindrical tube. It looks like a paper towel roll holder.
Okay.
And it's a tissue box that's shaped that way, so you can put it in your cup holder in your car. And it is the greatest thing because this is totally TMI, but the number of things I've passed as a tissue in my car is like not.
Oh, like anyone who's raised children
Okay.
and been in a car for more than like 30 minutes knows it's like, does
Okay.
anyone have a piece of paper?
Yeah,
Does anyone?
really? Yeah. So it is so nice just to have it right next
That's
to me.
so cool.
It's so neatly in there. And then my mom also got me these. They're like eucalyptus tablets. They're the same consistency as like a bath bomb,
Okay.
kind of that hard powder like consistency. And you just throw it in the bottom of your shower when you're heating it up. I'm such a spa girl.
Oh my gosh, that sounds amazing.
Yeah, can't afford to go to the spa every day, but this at least gives me a taste. And it's so relaxing and just kind of takes your everyday shower up a notch.
So
So
it's like a bath bomb, but it's a shower bomb.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
we'll get it. We'll put it in the show notes. We'll
and I
find
love.
it. We'll put it there for
Yeah,
everyone.
I'm sensitive to smells, but this is
Uh-huh.
like really refreshing, and eucalyptus is a very natural scent. So
One of my favorites.
yeah, so
Yes.
good.
Oh my gosh, I love these options. Those were great savoring options.
Oh,
Like,
good.
thank you, Lord, for my tissue box that fits into my cup holder and
Absolutely.
for having tools that I need and to have a shower spa experience is amazing. So,
So
okay,
good.
we'll drop those both in the show notes for you guys. And Nicole, thank you so much for making time for us. You guys, this is her book, Nicole Zasowski, What If It's Wonderful? Truly an amazing resource. So you guys can go grab it. It's for sale this week. Yay.
Yay.
Thanks for being with us, Nicole.
Oh my gosh, this was so fun for me.
Awesome. Hey, thanks for tuning in to the Let's Be Real podcast. If you have a question for the show, you can send it to me at nicole@nicoleunis.com. And hey, if you're enjoying this, we'd love for you to like, subscribe, share it with your friends, pass it on, shout it from the rooftops, whatever you feel like doing, because the reality is, let's get as many people getting real as possible. Talk to you soon.